Hey, this is Lars Frederiksen, and you're watching Heavy Consequence.
That show at the Garden with the Misfits, which was the last time I saw you guys. I was there at
Oh,
that,
wow.
and I got to say, I've been going to concerts for a long time, and that was one of the most magical moments I've ever witnessed. It's a top 5 concert for me all time.
Cool.
Yeah, it was incredible, and I remembered it so vividly. I remember, you guys opening for them, and well, first off, Misfits sounded incredible that night. I heard like some of those early reunion shows were a little hit and miss, but that Garden, I don't know what it was. It was just an incredible night. But you guys opened, played an amazing show. And I remember you expressing a lot of reverence for just being there. You were naming, New York hardcore bands. And can you just talk about that? Because as a fan, it was an incredible experience. But for someone like you who was on stage, playing Madison Square Garden with Rancid, opening for Misfits, who many people thought would never thought you'd see Ben and Jerry on stage together again. What was that like for you, that experience?
Well, wanting to play the Garden goes back to me watching WWF TV and seeing Superfly Snuka jump off the cage on Morocco. I know that changed a lot of people's lives, and not just in people who later became professional wrestlers, but it changed my life. And regardless of what happened to them in their personal lives, at that moment, that experience that I watched on TV, I was like, oh my God, I need to go there. And I don't care what I do, but I have to do something there, And I had actually never stepped foot in that building up until that day, which is the funny thing about it. I tried to go there once, me and Toby Morris, and I think maybe it was Isaac too. We tried to just go and get in just to kind of see if we could see it or something. And I think there was an event there, so they wouldn't let us in, whatever. So we ended up walking along, but I only been on the outside of the building. But not only to play with the Misfits, it's like, they're obviously a different level. They're legendary, they're iconic. I don't remember, I can't even tell you, how many times you would see a Devil Lock. They were, when you're a kid growing up, they had an influence on the punk rock culture in a way that was new and totally completely different. It wasn't just mohawks and spiky hair or shaved heads. And, it was a whole horror punk thing or something, I don't even know what else to call it. That's what we used to call it back, 30 years, 40 years ago. But what my point is that they had such a giant influence on the music and on the scene. I would say that they had as much, they were just as significant as, let's say, Black Flag, or the Circle Jerks. No one's as significant as the Ramones, but you think of the Clash and what they brought and that element to it. The Misfits did something like that to punk rock at the same time. They might have not been on your radar, but if you had an opportunity to hear them back then, it was the guitar sounds and everything was a little out of tune, but Glenn sounded like Elvis Presley, and it was fucking rad. They were hooky and shit. So that was cool. And then also to play with the Damned, obviously, one of the very first punk bands. So it's like, you get that opportunity, and you're sitting in the middle, and you're kind of just, looking around and just kind of thinking, how the fuck did I get here? Like literally, how the fuck did I get here? And yeah, I don't know, man. It was definitely one of those experiences where you kind of knew like what you were doing, but at the same time, it was so fucking surreal, and it was over before you knew it. Like I remember around song 9, I finally could take a breath and just kind of go, oh my God. And then you hear the crowd, and that was the first time I heard the crowd. Because, I think we had like 45 minutes or 50 minutes, which is like very short for us, and just taking that moment and sucking all that in, and having like our loved ones there and people that we had known from the very early days, like, all my New York hardcore homies, that's my family, man. And like, I was representing them too, the Madballs, the AFs, the Sheer Terrors, Murphy's Law, those are my brothers. My legit brothers. That's my family. So it's like, it's my crew. And it's just, so to be up there, it was like, I'm also doing it for them, even though I'm the California guy, and, the New York hardcore scene, very tight knit, and not a lot of people, you know, from California, I mean, the hardcore scene, when we were playing with those bands in 1993, the hardcore scene and the punk rock scene were very separate. Even though we would go see hardcore bands because we liked the music or whatever, it was rare to see any kind of punk rocker at a hardcore show and vice versa. And when we did those Sick of It All shows in 93, that's when things started to change. And you started to see more and more of these bands starting to play together, And so just having that camaraderie there with that scene, and New York accepted us, the hardcore scene in specific accepted Rancid as one of theirs, and you always could feel that from the love that you got, and when I would come to New York, I wasn't hanging out with Kraut. I was hanging out with Freddie Madball. I was hanging out with Ezak. I was hanging out with Jimmy Costapo. I was hanging out with Paul Berry, Roger Merritt, what I'm saying? Like, I would hang out with Doug Holland, but my point is that, like, how we were accepted into that scene and into that world by them. We made lifelong friends. I'm still friends with them dudes. Like I said, those guys, are my crew. They're my brothers, so it's like, to shout them out on their stage in their town, that was a no-brainer.